Today's episode is brought to you by the numbers 36 and 50. Two wonderful numbers.
The story you are about to hear is true.
Is it true? Is it true?
The story is true.
Nobody was talking about it.
The story is true.
You should hold back. You should hold back.
End of the civilized world.
Is it true? Is it true? Well, take a look.
You're building a culture to encourage international terrorism. All the names have been changed.
Hold back. Hold back. Nothing will hold up.
All the names have been changed.
Hold back. Nothing will hold us back.
Welcome back to All Hell Can't Stop Us. I'm Jeff Cliff, and this is my vlog slash podcast slash record of the time slash alternative to the RIA, the IFBI, Netflix, Spotify, and your commercial radio, as well as John Gormley and the like, as well as a new set of characters this week that I just learned about. It is a new possible threat slash group that we should be aware of and concerned about, especially out here in Saskatchewan. This is a group, the Seed IP Alliance. So I'm going to just open up their website here right off the hop, and this is the quote Seed Innovation and Protection Alliance. Respect seed innovation. Ooh, that's a interesting little backronym going on there. So they have all kinds of. Let's see, we got the California Seed Association, Seeding the Future since 1856, American Tacky, Missouri Soybeans, Montana Seed Trade Association. And this is a large conglomerate of different interest groups. So let's see if we can recognize any in here. I'm not seeing any off the top of my head that I can recognize. So let's see here. Knowing, what do? Let's see. They promote the value of seed innovation, which by itself, that's a good thing. I have no problem with that. And then, quote, knowing how to protect your innovations. SIPA strives to identify and develop educational materials as well as best practices related to the identification, promotion, and protection of seed innovation. Let's click on that, protecting your seed. Oh man, I think there's some kind of a Bible verse about protecting your seed. I wish I could quote that off the top of my head. Someone please drop me that quote in the comment section. But quote, is your seed protected? We believe education is the foundation of transparency. Therefore, we work to educate members, the industry, growers, and the community at large on the benefits of seed innovation and rights and responsibilities of intellectual property owners concerning seeds and traits, including patents, plant variety protection, plant breeders' rights, trademarks, and copyrights. How do you know if your seed may be protected? Talk to your seed dealer. And then goes in kind of a list of drop downs, talking about patents, talking about U.S. plant variety protections, PVPs, licenses, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets, though their website is broken and their drop downs don't actually work. Hooray. So let's see here. So to become a SIPA member, the Seed Innovation and Protection Alliance is established to promote the understanding and value of seed innovation, as well as to facilitate and promote the respect of intellectual property rights for the benefit of members, growers, industry associates, consumers, and the agricultural community. To learn more, visit our benefits and terms on our website. So it looks like this is basically the RIAA equivalent for agriculture. a group that is going to be pushing this idea of intellectual property in the space where farmers can be affected by it. And of course, through farmers, that means that the things that we eat, which of course everything we eat practically comes from farmers, whether it's meat, whether it's plant, whether it's, what was it we were eating last night, cyanobacteria, whatever it is, there's probably a farmer involved in making it, in delivering it to the farm gate at least, or to the market. However their distribution systems work, these guys want to get in the way and have layers of middlemen and lawyers telling who can grow what, under what conditions, and to restrict the whole thing with patents so that one corporation, for example, Bayer, could own the patent to, for example, a strain of grain or a strain of soy or a strain of rice, and that if you want to grow it, even if you have the seeds in your possession, which is possible, if you are a farmer and you grow something that produces seeds, you may want to collect those seeds. And then if you try to plant them or in any way use them in a way that is against the wishes of these copyright or patent holders, and actually that's the weird thing that they talk about copyrights here. Usually this sort of thing is patents. I seem to remember it was Percy Schmeiser. When he got caught, that was a patent issue? Or was it a license issue? I'm starting to forget now. It's been a while. But in any case, why are they talking about copyrights? Copywriting food. Why is this even a thing? And then U.S. plant variety protections, which I guess we could Google that later. I'm sure there is some package of rights that goes along with that. And then trade secrets. Again, it's kind of weird that they're grouping all these things together, which is a mistake that people make when they think of things in terms of intellectual property, because each of these rights is different. The laws involved are different. The issues involved and the ethical considerations involved in each of these is different, and how it affects the farmer is probably different too. But in any case, this is going to be a group that we're going to probably be talking more about in the future as I dig more into their interaction with who they interact with and how. And this is going, oh, they have a tip line. Ooh, interesting. I might be giving that a call later. But this is something to be aware of, I think. Given how much trouble the RIAA and the MPAA have caused in the world, and how much delayed our technological development as a species, we have been dragged back because of those two organizations. This group right here has the potential to do the same thing for food. And that means mass starvation, perhaps? I don't know. The possibilities are pretty open as far as what kind of damage they could do. They've probably been at it for a while, but this is something I do not want to see taking over our food supply, this idea of one group of corporate owners controlling who can grow what, etc. So that is something to keep in mind. So that is not the only thing going on this week. I could not, in all honesty, produce a show like this, a weekly broadcast talking about the things that are going on in the world without mentioning the Wuhan coronavirus that has been of the talk of the world this past week. And unfortunately, details are a little hard to verify, given I'm not in China, I do not speak Chinese, my contacts in China have not been in contact with me since this outbreak started, and there's a lot of details that really big information and news sources are getting wrong about this, or at least disagreeing with each other. You got certain groups saying, actually, I'm not even going to go into the details of things that I think are contentious. However, it is worth mentioning that this is something that is going on. It has infected somewhere between, let's say, 1,000 people and 100,000 people. Something in that range, maybe a little bit more, probably something in that range. It allegedly has an incubation period of around 2 weeks, give or take, so that you, once you get infected, can continue to infect people, possibly without knowing it, for about 2 weeks. It can kill you. The mortality rate, I'm sure they're still kind of narrowing it down exactly what it is, but it's about 5%, somewhere between, say, 1 and 5%. It has been compared in terms of mortality rate to the 1918 Spanish flu, which I kind of wanted to bring this up, in that we are due for something like this. These sorts of pandemic type of diseases, whatever you want to call it, they are a feature of human history. We do, as a species, have a long experience of diseases like this coming through, wiping out a whole portion of the population, and then that is kind of their run. They either overshoot and kill off too many people, or they undershoot and they don't spread very well. This one seems to have a lot of the properties that would allow it to spread all over the world. However, you could have said the same thing a couple of years ago about the bird flu. I think that was back in, I can't remember what year that was. And then before that, there was the swine flu. I think that was about 2009 that I was heading out into rural Saskatchewan, and in hopes that there would be enough of a barrier between me and the flu that was coming that we wouldn't, if anyone got really hit, it would be in the cities. The small towns might have survived a little bit better. But again, that never really came to pass. Like, there were people that died, I seem to recall, in both the bird flu and the swine flu. But again, the numbers are small, especially on the scale and scope of the Earth. Nobody I knew died. It was from my perspective, from the perspective of someone in Saskatchewan, that was not a big deal. Everyone was freaking out about it. And I'm sure in the public health world, it's kind of like the Y2K thing, where a lot of people freaked out about the Y2K thing and then fixed this situation so that a lot of people didn't get affected by Y2K related issues. Same thing with the bird flu, the swine flu, SARS. Public health officials around the world and doctors worked their ass off and did something about the issue. And as a result, what could have been a pandemic killing thousands, millions of people, in I think all of those cases turned out to be relatively minor, at least on that scale. Like, I don't know the death rate or the total death count on each of those diseases or whatever, but this one could very well be like that, where it freaks everyone out. The public health systems of the world react, and especially the public health system in China reacts. And China has been getting wealthier over time. Compared to 2009, they're actually quite a bit better off as a country. And as a government, they have a lot more resources than they even did back then to deal with a situation where 100,000 people, let's say it's the highball number, right? Let's say that's accurate, and that the doctor's complaining that it's the Chinese government official numbers are wrong, that it is actually 100,000 people. They've shut down at least one entire city. They've quarantined something like, again, the numbers are kind of hard to verify. I don't see any reason to doubt the numbers I've seen, which are roughly about 46 million people, which again, that's more than the population of Canada that are not really allowed to leave their homes. You see the streets in these cities, they're just dead quiet. You see pictures of people at their workplace and everything's covered in plastic, including the people. It's a really weird thing to be an observer to on the internet. Again, some of these pictures and events may have been falsified to freak people out. I know InfoWars has jumped on this as something that they want people to freak out about. They're certainly not alone. All kinds of woo and supplement purveyors are trying to make a quick buck off of this. And that is just the way things are on the internet and around the world. Someone's going to make a quick buck over someone panicking. So is this something to panic about? Probably not. But again, over the long haul of human history, we can expect that something like this is going to come around. Maybe in our lifetime, maybe not in our lifetime. Again, the 1918 Spanish flu, that's what, 102 years ago now. So we can kind of guesstimate that this sort of thing happens about once every 100 years, 110, 102, whatever. So maybe we just rolled that bad 1 on a 1d20 followed by an under 5 on a 1d20, and this is going to be the big one. Or maybe it's just going to blow over like the swine flu kind of did. It's all going to depend on the disease and China's reaction to it, and the rest of the public health systems around the world and their reaction to it. So that's going to be something interesting to watch, especially over the next 2 weeks. Because again, the incubation period is about 2 weeks, so we got about a 2-week delay before we get a real clear scope of how bad this is, and we're going to see it very quickly. Now, while that's going on, though, I noticed there's a website I'm going to link to here called bioarxiv, which is basically the biology and medical science equivalent of a website called Arxiv. Now, Arxiv is a place for scientists, legitimate scientists, and possibly quasi-legitimate scientists to publish their findings. Publishing your findings is part of science. And if you can format it in this just basic way that looks like it could be a legitimate bit of research, and that bar is there, you have to get over that bar. But once you're over that bar, they pretty much let you publish whatever you want, at least is my understanding, with the understanding that you're acting in good faith, actually doing the research, that your numbers aren't completely and utterly made up, that sort of thing. I don't know the exact restrictions, but my understanding is they're not very tight, with the understanding that then once it's posted there, there's a little bit of discussion about it between the experts in the field, and then if it's worth it, then it's submitted to a real journal. Once it's submitted to a real journal, then it is peer reviewed, and then from that, it becomes kind of part of our understanding of science, and science kind of clicks forward a notch, and we repeat the process. Now, this website here, bioRxiv, the preprint server for biology, has a whole bunch of these papers that are currently being published about this current outbreak, including the entire genome of this virus, a comparison of this virus to things like SARS. Apparently, it's very close to SARS, and it's probably got a lot of the same characteristics, both on terms of the effects that a human being would expect being infected with it, as well as how the virus actually works on the small scale. And just kind of thumbing through some of these things, it's looking at the patterns of human transition. It's got what else we got? What is vital for preventing sustained transmission in new locations? We've got the transmission dynamics. We've got the evidence for virus evolution, and quote, there's concern about the new coronavirus, this 2019-nCoV as a global public health threat. They are analyzing it, and it should be considered a coronavirus distinct from the SARS virus, probably transmitted from bats or another host where mutations conferred upon it the ability to infect humans. So that's kind of interesting to note, especially since the Chinese government was accusing, at least in a post that I saw, I've lost this original link, but that was the Chinese government's line, that this was originally something found in bats, and that there was a particular chef or someone telling people to eat bat meat. And because of that, that is where the virus came from. I don't know if that's true or not, but it certainly jives with this particular abstract, which again, I don't know if it's been peer reviewed. This article is a preprint and has not been certified by peer review. So who knows? That could be totally made up. But this is at the point where real evolutionary biologists can look at it and then go, okay, does this paper hold water? Is there merit to it? And this is an important thing because a lot of what happens in science is, in other fields especially, when scientists do work like this, they put their findings on websites like ResearchGate or whatever, and then the public and other experts go to read their findings and are met with a paywall. And sometimes universities pay to get all their researchers through this paywall, but a lot of universities around the world can't afford the fees for these expensive journals, especially given how many of them there are in the world. And so researchers would be locked out, if not for, of course, Sci-Hub. Sci-Hub lets people just kind of cut through paywalls. They're the heroes of the internet for doing so, but the paywalls kind of slow things down, especially for legitimate researchers. And so what's different about this outbreak, is that this research is happening in public, and it's happening in a way that the experts don't have that red tape to hold them back. And I found a tweet, I don't know if I copied it here, but there was a guy on Twitter basically commenting that during the SARS outbreak, this was not happening, that the paywalls were getting in the way in the SARS outbreak. And in retrospect, the same research was being done. Virtually the same kind of efforts were happening in the scientific world, but the results of that research took longer to get into print and longer to get into the hands of the researchers and the medical health professionals than the pandemic itself. The pandemic it had a short enough lifespan just due to the structure of the virus and its particular means of infection, whatever, that it was going to die given the public health treatment and response to it. Whereas the scientists are acting really quickly and jumping on it, which is, again, good because there's 46 million people whose lives are directly impacted by it already, never mind the 100,000 who may or may not have it. But there's also a really interesting paper that I just saw while looking through bioRxiv right before this show started. Again, I haven't read this yet, but I encourage those of you who could understand this sort of thing to actually go and check it out because it's very relevant to what's going on in the world. Quote, post in infectivity prediction of Wuhan 2019 novel coronavirus using deep learning algorithm by a whole bunch of names I'm not even going to try to pronounce, of which the lead name is Kyung Guo. But this is really cool because deep learning is really not that old. Did we even have deep learning when the SARS outbreak was happening? I don't think we did. I think this is something from, 2016, 2017, something around those, right before AlphaGo, right? So the idea that we're using these advanced AI tools at the benefit of our species to help us survive a possible pandemic outbreak, that to me is an amazing thing to be living through. And so I'm not going to get into the results, or it is also a preprint, so Who knows if the results are valid, but this is something we have that we didn't have before. And so it's something that should give people who are freaking out a little bit of hope that, oh, hey, this could very well be beyond, or giving us results that were beyond our intellectual capacity, even as recent as 4 or 5 years ago. Now we can see how these viruses tick and what we can do about it on a much quicker timescale. So where is Wuhan? Wuhan is, I've got the map open here. It is a little bit west of Nanjing. So Nanjing is kind of a notable place in China, and it's just a little bit southwest of that. I don't have the scale up here, but you can kind of think of it that way. So that is one of the things that's going on in the world. The other thing, which is actually quite related, I find, is, quote, the most dangerous situation that humanity has ever faced. The doomsday clock has now moved to 100 seconds to midnight, closer than the closest point of the Cuban Missile Crisis. That is how much the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists are freaking out over all the things that are going on in the world. And it's more or less the same news release that came when they moved it to, 2 minutes to midnight? There's a couple little new bits here. One is the supersonic ICBMs, or that Russia has been testing, and I'm sure the US and China have as well. And they also mention, actually I'm going to hold off on that. We're going to actually talk about that later today. But then there's also, I think that's about it for this news release. So long story short, there are a lot of existential risks that are impacting the species right now. And it is becoming more and more apparent that we are not acting to reduce them. So things like climate change, the models, even this past week, I think, the unofficial models that are going to build the next IPCC report are telling us that the previous models were way too conservative, as usual, and that things are actually worse in climate change than we were told. Of course, that could change as the science and the research continues, but it is definitely a weird winter here in Saskatoon, I'll give you that. And climate change is something that is still going on, still heading the species in directions where we may not be able to get out of. So there's that, as well as, of course, the escalation in Iran between Russia and China and the United States, getting closer and closer to war. That is definitely not a good thing as far as our ability to survive is concerned. So there's that. But that is, other than that, it's pretty much, again, what the last press release was saying, only time has moved on. We didn't act on climate change over the past couple of years all that much. I mean, here in Canada, we implemented the carbon tax. The carbon tax hasn't really been around long enough to have impacted too much, although, again, based on the complaints that I'm hearing from the pro-oil crowd, it's probably doing a little bit to help, but again, we're still doing the too little too late to avoid most of the negative consequences of it. So there's that. While that is going on, I had my bike breakdown twice over the past 2 weeks, more on my kind of personal side, but again, it is hard for me to get around. It is hard for me to be as effective and efficient at accomplishing all the tasks, including bringing you this broadcast, when I am forced to walk or bus everywhere. You may notice that this broadcast started a little bit late. Sorry about that for those of you watching the live stream, but things are still kind of delayed because of the various ways that my bike has broken down and the metal involved snapped. So that, again, that's kind of on my own personal life side. There is more going on in the world. Here's another one from TechDirt. This article, of course, relates to the beginning of this episode. Quote, YouTube streamer hit with demonetization, which is basically the punishment you get as a paid YouTuber, where they basically take your ability to make money off of your videos away, as well as the ability to license your videos as Creative Commons, which is not something that a lot of people really talk about in reference to this. But anyway, they hit this guy with a demonetization over copyright claims to the numbers 36 and 50. This is Timothy Geigner. Quote, we've long had discussions about how wide open for abuse and error YouTube's copyright and demonetization practices are, between the ham-fisted method by which the accused is treated as guilty from the get-go, and the impossibility of doing large-scale policing like this in a way that's even moderately good, to the avenue for abuse that all of this creates. The fact is that YouTube's stance on copyright is a mess. The end result of all of this is that creators on YouTube operate in constant peril of having their accounts suspended or video revenues taken by others, with the recourse for fraud and error being convoluted and lengthy. For a site that is in the business of content creation, that's a real problem. It is a problem that can get quite ridiculous, as evidenced by one recent streamer who had 2 videos demonetized over claims by a third party that she infringed its copyrights on the numbers 36 and 50. And it shows a tweet by N Munition. Oh, that's a witty name, N Munition. I love it. Did you guys know that you can copyright the number 36? Quote, a copyright owner using content ID, oh god, of course it's a content ID bot hit. Anyway, continuing on, claimed some material in your video. This is not a copyright strike. This claim does not affect your account status. There are either ads running on your video with the revenue going to the copyright owner, or the copyright owner is receiving stats about your video's views. Video title, The Witcher 3 VOD Part 21, copyrighted content 36. Claimed by Fullscreen Incorporated. Her response, quote, you can't copyright a number, you wombats. By the way, also got copyright claims for the number 50, LMAO. And it shows content used, 3650. Claim type, video. Impact on video, video cannot be monetized. Now, if you're wondering who in the world is claiming trademarks on these 2 random numbers, they don't actually seem random. Very close. Random numbers would probably be further away, wouldn't they? Anyway, continuing on. It appears to be a company in the YouTube content creation business as well. Why they think they own the copyright on these 2 numbers and can use them to siphon the income of innocent YouTube streamers is anybody's guess. The claim made by the company Fullscreen was simply over the number 36. There wasn't anything else to do with the media that they were trying to protect, or any timestamps, just that the number 36 was not N Munition's property. Fullscreen describes themselves as a social content company for talent and brands on their company website. The brand 36. Oh my God, we got to protect the brand of 36. The brand of 36 is so important. I mean, it's almost 37. I'm 37. It's so sad, so sad. Anyway, owned by Otter Media, a subsidiary of, guess who? Warner Media, who doesn't hold the license for The Witcher 3 or any trademarks related to the number 36. Of course, this is Warner Media, which is, of course, a member of the RIAA and MPAA. They are one of the bigger companies, the big media or octopi, controlling media creation and distribution around the world and on the internet. So anyway, continuing on. This is problematic for N Munition's YouTube channel because while the claims are active, Fullscreen takes all the monetization for the video. While the videos are over 2 years old, with both having very little views, they still leave a stain on her YouTube record. Quote, now I fully expect that YouTube will get this corrected fairly quickly, as there's nearly zero chance that there's anything remotely valid about this copyright claim. And of course, TechDirt is covering it, and maybe even people like me are covering it, who knows? But that really isn't the point. For YouTube's system and process to so clearly favor the accuser, particularly given how much error and abuse there is in all of this, is not sustainable. At some point, content creators will simply have had enough and go somewhere else. That might be far off on the horizon, but it's going to come eventually if some kind of change isn't made on YouTube's part. And it's interesting that lately I've been seeing more and more people talking about BitChute. And I seem to remember one of the video services that I tried for a while to broadcast this show on. They did an upgrade and broke my account, and I haven't been able to upload since. Maybe I'll upload this video, which, again, reminder for those who are listening to this on Spotify, turn Spotify off, disconnect, stop giving them money. But anyway, continuing on, there is alternatives in the wings. They're coming. I think YouTube's days are starting to be numbered. It's going to take a while. Like, they're huge, and they have a audience of billions of people, I think, at this point. And you can't get a billion people to turn on a dime. It's going to take a long time to undo the damage to the culture of the world that putting our whole video libraries into this unreliable and ham-fisted system it's going to take a while and a lot of effort, and a lot of things are going to get lost, and a lot of videos are not going to make the transition. And as much as we hope that we can trust YouTube to be around when this happens, Google again has a history of axing parts of it, or at least Alphabet now, that aren't making a go of it. And so as YouTube goes into this death spiral where people start leaving it en masse, we can kind of expect that things are going to get lost. So something to kind of look forward to. So that is one of the things that's going on. Actually, no, before I go too much further, I do have 2 more bits of music to play. As promised, none of my invited guests are willing to participate or able today. So I have 2 songs, one of which is Creative Commons. The other is, again, a little bit on the line. It's a little bit on that gray area. I'm not sure if I'm going to get a copyright hit for it. Well, I guess we're going to find out. I didn't on the last one. Dan Bull apparently doesn't enforce his restrictions, which I can't see him doing so. Good on him for that. The next 2 bands, the first one is Ninjaspark, which I don't know if I played anything by them yet. They're another one of the 8-bit peoples, which is all bit tunes or 8-bit music. Music for the Nintendo generation, which this is another one of those kind of catchy songs. There were 2 versions of it, though. I wasn't sure which one is the one that I like better. I'm just kind of taking a guess on this one, and this is going to be hard to pronounce. Skolavslutning. Skolavslutning. I'm probably screwing that up, and it probably means something in like Norwegian or something. And then there's also, actually, I think a Norwegian band, Machinae Supremacy, from their album Rise of a Digital Nation, Laser Speed Force, which is actually probably one of my favorite songs, period. This is like the song to listen to when you're running, to like keep inspired to keep running. That's how I feel about it anyway. So that one, we'll find out if the copyright ID bot hits us for that. But it was a joint project between Machinae Supremacy and the Pirate Bay. Again, just like Dan Bull, to give this to the world as their kind of offering to the digital nation as its kind of anthem, or at least this album as something of an anthem for an entire new culture, an entire new generation of people. And I hope people treat it that way, because this is just sexy music. So I'm going to play these 2, and then we'll come back, and hopefully you enjoy. Yeah, I really wanted to headbang to that one, but unfortunately the laptop is kind of on my lap right now, so that would probably cause all kinds of distortion and ruffling noises. Hopefully that wasn't too mangled by Facebook's sound compression algorithm. But that was, again, Machinae Supremacy, which normally their stuff isn't really all that free. Like, it is available for free to listen to on YouTube and stuff like that. But that album specifically was kind of given to the pirates of the world are, and so hopefully I won't get in too much trouble for including it here. Of course, go out and check them out. They may be your cup of tea if you're the type of person that is not too much of a purist on this sort of thing. So as far as what else is going on, I have an article here which I thought was going to be like not really all that relevant to what's going on in the world, but it turns out to be super relevant to what's going on this week specifically. So this is by Slate Star Codex, which is a really interesting guy. I think it's a guy, maybe it's a woman. I don't know. It's a person, a interesting person, and well worth your time to read, with the possible downfall that in order to read their stuff, they build on the work of both themselves and others going back years by this point. So you have to really stretch to really get all of the references of what they're referring to and what they're talking about. And so this one's from 2013. Again, kind of going back a little bit. And even this one is referring to a couple of things, which it's hard to kind of know when to start to introduce this to people. But I think this one might be worth the read here. So, quote, when Osama bin Laden died, so this would have been, what, 2010, 2011, something like that. Quote, I had to spend the next week or so listening to very preachy people talk about how it was wrong to ever take delight in the death of a human being, no matter how evil they might have been. About how anyone who thought this was a cause for celebration ought to take a serious re-examination of their standards as a human being. About how it symbolized America's utter lack of civilization when people actually held impromptu parties in the street. When Margaret Thatcher died, I had to spend the next week or so listening to very preachy people talk about how demands from Thatcher worshippers that everyone else toned down their real feelings about her were ridiculous and offensive. About how much they loved this Guardian piece on misapplied death etiquette, stating that, quote, the demand for respectful silence in the wake of a public figure's death is not just misguided, but dangerous. About how awesome it was that some Britons actually held impromptu parties in the street. I have no data about the overlap between these two sets of very preachy people, but I bet it's larger than anyone with any faith in humanity left would naively predict, unquote. So what's going on here is he's trying to make the point that, or he's made the point that when a public figure dies, especially a public figure who's liked by a lot of people, there are going to be people who are upset and people who are grieving and who are hurting in a real sense. And that if you make fun of the person who is dead, or if you disrespect them, perhaps, if you dance on their grave, as I think many people have promised to do, if not did, for Margaret Thatcher, and who had been waiting a significant portion of their life for the chance to do so, that there is something there, that when it's our team that gets hurt, or someone on our team dies, we feel very different, and we expect kind of a double standard from the people that we naively don't respect when it's their turn to have one of their leaders and icons die. And I am just as guilty of this, I think. Going back, I was totally okay with Osama bin Laden dying, and I didn't see any problem at all with people celebrating his death, for example. But then I wondered, after the fact, why I found it was so difficult when I approached Sunni extremists in the Muslim world, why I was not able to connect with them as effectively. And I was wondering how I could connect more effectively and what I could do to build this rapport up with them so that they could possibly be led away from this worldview of theirs. Maybe step by step, little by little, and not just Sunni extremists, of course. The same is true of people in the SAS party The same is true of people in the Conservative Party going door to door, knocking on houses here in Saskatchewan and Saskatoon, that it was hard sometimes to connect with people. And I did my best. I put in the good college try. And I thought there were a good couple of times where even across political lines, I was able to, from a human being to a human being, reach some kind of a connection with them. But I would have loved for that to have happened more. And I think the point here is one of the ways to connect with people who you don't like, who you disagree with on a fundamental level, or maybe you just disagree with on some kind of a strategic level or kind of higher level than that, where there is a need for political unity. And the way to get there is to not jump on the graves of their dead, that to not celebrate as much when their particular icons or leaders or what have you die or are killed or whatever. Or that's one way of taking this. The other way of taking it is the other way, of course, in that when someone close to you or someone you consider important dies, and someone else who didn't like them, and of course everyone's got enemies, right? No matter who you pick, there's very few people that can, if there's any, that can claim that there's no enemies of them at all, no matter who it is. So someone is going to be celebrating whenever that person dies. And the other way to deal with this kind of moral dilemma is to be totally okay with that and to kind of repress or control your default emotion, your reaction to that situation, which is going to be snapping at them or in some way being unhappy with them. But to tell yourself that, oh, when it's my turn, I'm going to be just as much of that asshole as they are. So I'm going to let them, because, again, you don't want to be a hypocrite here, a moral hypocrite. Or, of course, that's the other alternative, of course, is to just own being a hypocrite and not give a shit about whether or not your actions and your expectations of other actions or of actions of others are in any way consistent. That's, I guess, the third way you can deal with this. But it's worth thinking about it, right? Each individual is going to have to make their own choice of which of those three possibilities they're going to choose to try to pursue. And of course, sometimes it's really hard, right? Like if you're one of the people who had someone close to you die on 9/11 and Osama bin Laden, the person who did it, or at least possibly did it, right? that person dies. Or let's say George Bush is eventually going to keel over. He's starting to get up there in age. One of these days, it's going to be a choice for you to think, do I celebrate this person or do I just kind of let people grieve? Help them through their grief, perhaps. That's a choice that you're going to have to make. And this week specifically, there's one person who died in the public sphere, not someone I really care too much about, but one person who I've seen a couple of eulogies posted on my various feeds about, and it is someone who has a checkered past, has a side of him that perhaps people were unaware of, but is coming to the surface now that he is dead, to remind people that he isn't perhaps the ideal that people may want him to be. There is an in-group and an out-group to this. There is a side of the world who respects him and a side of the world who does not. And yet, here we are faced with this issue. Do we really jump on him and the people who are grieving about him? Is it enough to merely just point out that there's another side of him and then back off to let people have their respectful silence? Is it enough to give people a little bit of time, maybe a day or two, to adapt, to grieve, and then to move on? What kind of leader does it have to be? These are the questions that are probably worth thinking about. And again, especially since someone this week has died that fits this to a T. Maybe we can screw this one up and get it right the next time. And maybe when we try to come to a kind of consensus later on, after thinking about this for a while, we'll be more able to get there. So that was that. There's one last thing I want to mention, and I'm trying to think of the way to say it in a way that won't get me completely kicked off of. So there's a major adult website that has recently decided that it would join the dark web, that it would join the Tor network, that it would allow users to connect to it from and using Tor. It has an onion service now, which means it is a website that you can only go to if you're using Tor, and that protects people who go to it from being found out that they're going to this website, even if the network between you, the person going to this website, and them is compromised, for example, by the NSA or the Russian equivalent or the Chinese equivalent, or maybe your school or your church if they control the local internet service provider. That it doesn't matter. All they're going to see is encrypted traffic to the Tor network, and that's all they're going to see. And they specifically cite a lot of their users are having trouble in places where it is illegal to be gay or bisexual or trans or lesbian, and that they're doing this to allow these people to express the side of themselves, to have access to this consensually produced, hopefully, material, legal material. There's a lot of adult material on the dark web that is not legal, but this is not going to be part of that. This is going to be an above board option for people interested in that sort of thing. And so for all of you people out there who are exploring your own, that particular aspect of your life, who are looking for videos of naked people doing things, being in, I don't know, I won't go much further than that on this particular feed, but this is a place for that, and that a lot of people go to. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going there, but I know for pretty much certain that at least some of the people who are listening to this will eventually find their way there at some point in their life. And so it is worth pointing out that, again, I've been running a Tor exit node for years, probably decades, pushing a second decade now. I think it was 2004 since I started messing around with this stuff. So like it's something that I've been helping to make stable enough for this particular website, this particular adult website, to consider it available enough that there are millions and millions, if not billions, of users and viewers would be able to rely on. And so when you out there in the world are exploring that aspect of yourself, when you're looking for that thing that perhaps you will hide from other people in your life, you could very well be using my exit node to do it. And I hope you enjoy and don't get too caught up in it, because it's not really all that good for you. But again, the people listening, you're going to find your way there. So hopefully you enjoy it and use it responsibly. So there's that. That is also the thing that is going on this week. And that should be about it for this week. I don't think I have time for the last thing I wanted to talk about. So please tune in next week, hopefully a little bit earlier in the day. And if you enjoyed this broadcast and would like to see more of it, feel free to throw a coin or two at my subscriber star at subscriberstar.com/Jeff-Cliff. And with that, I'm going to play the goodbye song and fade out. And we will see you all next week.
We'll see you tomorrow, but in the meanwhile, always remember to be good, and so...
Goodbye now. Goodbye now. I thought the party was the time. I expected evening, forgetting the time. I can't deny. But now goodbye. Goodbye now. Goodbye now. The trip by taxi wasn't far. We'd linger longer if I had a car. No use to cry. And now goodbye. There's one advantage to our leaving. It brings about a special kiss. I hope that this eternally. A momentary parting, just a second, then we're starting. Oh, goodbye now. Goodbye now. It's just a moment, we're apart. Make it certain I'll leave you my heart. But for now, it's just goodbye now. leave. It brings about a special kiss. I hope that it will be eternally a momentary parting, just then we're starting. Oh, goodbye now. Goodbye, goodbye. It's just a moment. We're